I'm your host, Dr. Aliber Lozano. Today, we continue adulting here as we talk about alumni services and how you give back to those who are new to their careers. A special topic today is making connections, sustainable connections at work so that it helps in the trajectory of your career. To help me unpack this topic of building sustainable connections is Shantel Dixon. She's an AVID alumni, a PhD candidate. Yes, that's right. Wave hello to the subscribers. And also, she's a supervisor of student teachers currently at New Mexico State. Shantel, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you as well. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and happy to have you. You're going to talk to us about the importance of building networks, a community. And let me say it, networking is part of it, but this is a little bit more rigorous, building connections to have a community. And before we do that, let's talk about how your AVID journey helped us arrive today in talking in this podcast about making connections. So tell us a little bit about you being an AVID student and importantly, this concept in AVID about building an AVID family. How did you experience that as a student first? And then we're going to get to you. How did you create that as an AVID educator?
Well, I was very fortunate to be able to be in the AVID elective all through high school. And although I was involved in other programs and sports and things like that, I wasn't able to really develop like meaningful connections with others because I was super shy. And I didn't know how to create those connections. And so through being in AVID, with the relational capacity activities that are done in the classroom, working with my tutors, working with my teacher, I really started to build a sense of confidence in myself and trust in others. And that really opened the doors for me to be able to create connections with others in my class. And through that, I developed some really long lasting and very meaningful relationships, not just with the students in my class, but as well as with my teacher and my tutors. And those relationships are still going strong well beyond high school. And um, I still feel very supported by that community of people in my personal life and in my work life. And it's just such a great thing to be able to be a part of.
So you talked about the opportunity about being an AVID and even about creating that AVID family. We know that these are skills that you're learning to work within your peers and skills that are transferable. You graduated, you became a professional, and you started to work as a teacher, and you started teaching AVID. How did you remember what happened to you as a student that helped you as a teacher to build a community of students, of scholars, and that led into even calling it an AVID family? What are those skills? What are those behaviors? Unpack that for us.
Well, I think when I stepped into the classroom and I had my first group of AVID students, it was really important to me that they had a very authentic and genuine experience. And I wanted them to be able to create connections with one another and with anyone who entered our room in the same way that I was able to, where they became long lasting, meaningful connections that um, became drivers in their personal lives and in their careers and while they're in college. And part of that was really just being as authentic to myself as possible with my students while also acknowledging that there's boundaries and I never wanted to blur those boundaries, but making sure that they knew that that classroom was a safe space for them to grow and to learn and to fail and to succeed. And building that support system and that trust among my students was the key factor in those relationships being able to be built and then maintained all through high school and then as they entered the work field and then into college.
So tell me more about what were those skills as students entered the classroom and then other adults came into the classroom. What did you expect them to do? What are the behaviors or skills?
Well, it all revolved around risk taking, and we practiced building up that confidence before other people entered our classroom, so that they would know how to approach other adults and how to introduce themselves and welcome people into our setting. They practiced with one another, they practiced with other teachers, with their tutors, and they knew that if that didn't go as successfully as they imagined in our classroom, that it was a safe space that they could try again. And they weren't going to feel judgment from others. And it was kind of like our little playground of where we could experiment with different things and different social opportunities where they felt safe enough to take those risks, and be vulnerable in those situations while knowing they had a very strong support system in the classroom behind them.
So building community is going to take some time. It's going to take courage to take those risks. And sometimes you're going to fail, even at work, and fail fast and learn. And those are the durable skills that you're mentioning here. I do want to highlight about your special skill and why we're talking today, because you as an educator working with these young adults that later, as when they graduated and graduated, taking the skill set, you formed something called a Grad Pact. Hence our podcast today, calling out, saying it is the Connections Pact. Tell me more about this Grad Pact and what were the behaviors that are still occurring today in that building a community.
So the Grad Pact stemmed out of some end of year, junior year panic, when they started to realize, like, we're about to be seniors and stepping out into the world, and we're going to be away from each other. And we had built such like a comfort zone in our classroom that they started to realize, like, wait, this doesn't go with us. And so there was a day in the spring where there was just meltdown after meltdown, and there was a lot of crying and a lot of really big feelings happening in our classroom. And I realized that for some of the students in that classroom, those are the only people that they've ever known who support their goals and their ambitions and their dreams. And part of their fear of leaving was, well, who am I going to have? I'm going to be alone, or I'm not going to have anyone who's going to step up for me or support me or care about me. And so I just said, here's the deal. If whatever you choose after you graduate from high school, whether it's you go to college or you get your first like big kid job, or you decide you want to go start a family, and you, whatever that next big milestone for you outside of graduation is, just tell me when it is and I promise to be there. And that translated for them as, oh, well, if Miss K, which is what they called me at the time, is going to show up, then we should go too. And it became just this pact amongst one another that we would all show up for everybody in that classroom in whatever way they needed. So that meant for a lot of students, their next step was going to college and going to those college graduations. For others, they were going straight into the career fields. I had students who immediately went and started working with their families on opening a business and things of that sort. So we showed up to opening days, we showed up to graduations, but where they threw me for a loop was when I said that to them, they meant it to me too. So when I graduated with my master's, lo and behold, they showed up to my graduation. And so it just became a big part of that connection amongst myself and my students and my family. Everybody just kind of decided we were going to be each other's family and support system, no matter what that next big step was. And I can tell you, we did a whole lot of traveling over the summer of 2023, and it still continues. Some of them are going on for their masters. We got weddings and baby showers and business openings, and so it's an ongoing thing where it didn't just end with that one next big step. It's every next big step.
Wow. And what I'm taking away is this, I'm going to show up for you. And one of the things as a leader, especially as you're going to be leading in your career, whether it's a project or an actual team, one of my core values is saying, my goal is your success. You've just said, not only is my goal is your success, I'm going to show up when you succeed. So it's
Mhm.
about investment, it's about impact, and it's about celebrating. Those are some of the key things that I'm taking away. And you're saying, this is how you build a community. This is the pact of a working professional relationship. So I want to hear
Mhm.
from you as you take this graduation, this grad pact, and the activities that you did. How is this the same or different from an AVID family that we need to then apply at work? What are some risks that we need to take? What are risks that we don't take? Because it's the same, yet you're now a professional. Are there some differences?
I think like the number one part of it is find your people. Find people within your workplace that have similar goals as you do. And then you have to lean into those relationships. And we may not all be a go out for dinner after work kind of person, but if you can show up, just showing up means a lot for a lot of people. So kind of learning about your colleagues, learning the love languages, how people need you to show up for them so that they know how to show up for you. And really just making sure that you're also establishing some like hard boundaries on time and being respectful of people's time and your own needs and your own time. But I think it's these skills are definitely something that were built in the classroom, um, and that my students were able to then transfer. They recognized where to draw the boundaries with one another, so then they were able to learn how to do that in the workplace and where they needed to show up for others in the same way that they wanted people to show up for them.
Yeah. Having those connections, the two takeaways that you mentioned, and then you've actually mentioned several times, is make sure you have clear boundaries. And there are the self boundaries that you have to regulate, and there is the community boundaries that you also have to be aware of and regulate. The other part is find your people, like minded individuals. So you have those critical friends, if you will, that are at work. And as you said, they don't have to be the friends or family by definition that you're going to go out into your personal life. But how do you take that skill, that same circle of influence, and replicate it at work? Now, whether you're a first year or second year, there's always someone who's new. Sometimes it's you. What's the best icebreaker or conversation starter with a new colleague that you might want to see if they're your people, if they might be part of your work community?
Um, well, I have a few favorites. One is what's your favorite current TV show or the TV show you have rewatched the most amount of times? I've used that in my own experience, and for me personally, it's Friends. And so I know if I say that, I'm going to find somebody in my space that is like, oh, yeah, I've also rewatched every episode 10, 12 times, and I love it. But the other one that's a little bit, it's just an easy conversation starter is what's something you're excited about today? And just kind of getting to know people in the most like level one capacity that you possibly can, but just figuring out like, are they excited for the coffee breaks? Are they excited for a new platform that's being used at work? What is something that excites them? And it'll open that door so that you get a window into who they are as a person and where where their goals also lie.
You mean the best conversation starters aren't talking about politics, religion, and taxes? Those are the way you start community at work.
Those are
Uh,
hard no's.
those are hard no's on that. That's a hard
Hard
pass.
no. Hard
Uh,
boundary.
Yeah, and that's I wanted to joke about it to talk about that. This is something that doesn't belong at work unless you're involved in politics, and that's the nature of your work. And very few of our working individuals are in that very hardworking professional career. Um, I like that you said one of the things is what are you excited about? Because oftentimes also think about what you're excited about can take you off in it from that slump you're in or you're feeling tired. As you walk out the metaphorical door, what are you looking forward to? So I like that being something as a conversation starter to find your people and to start building community at work, because the things that excite them, as you will, may not excite you, but you will be there to support them and follow them through, especially when they reach a milestone and experience
Mhm.
success. Or if there's failure, you know how to support them and know the languages that they need in order to get through the day and into the next day.
And it leaves you room for follow-up. If you ask somebody about what's something they're excited about for the day, then the next day you could say, "Hey, how did that thing go?" And so it leaves the door open for follow-up conversation, and it really just kind of goes from there.
Yeah. Now, we've already talked about the hard passes and hard no's. The other thing that we've also talked about is some barriers. But what are some other unwritten rules, especially in the professional workplace, wherever you are, that we want to make sure we're aware of when we're trying to build community?
Um, I think a big one is always read the room. Try to practice being mindful of what you're stepping into, what is happening, not just within your workplace, but happening in the world around you, so that when you step into a space, you aren't breaching a topic that might be very touchy for people. So, really kind of just being mindful of reading the room and also respecting that first, not everybody is going to show up to work in the best mood of their life every single day. So if you're coming in with all the jokes that they may not hit and they may not land, and that's okay, it's not a reflection of you, but also not taking everything so personal that it makes you not love your work. You have to be a little bit more open to the nuance that not everybody is going to be in the best mood every day. So when you read the room, you can kind of see that and you can gauge how to have conversations or how to approach things in that setting.
Got it. Let's even dig a little deeper. So, what is the difference between being friendly and being professional, especially when you're trying to build connections?
Um, I think the biggest difference it comes back to your boundaries again and knowing what is appropriate to share and what's not appropriate to share in the workplace and with who it's appropriate to share and who it's not appropriate to share. Um, because blurring that line it can wreak havoc in the workplace. So you can establish relationships and they can be very meaningful and very powerful in the workplace, but you also have to be mindful that this is your career, this is your profession, this is a job setting, and you don't ever want to cross those boundaries in that setting. And it's okay if that person is somebody you also want to bring into your personal world, but making sure that there's a clear understanding of what happens at work versus what happens outside of the workplace.
Nice. We're going to talk about clear understandings, in other words, goals, in just a bit. But what happens if you don't click with your team or someone on your team doesn't click with you? How do you still maintain productive professional connections?
I think the best thing that we can do is keep our focus on the product, not the person. So, whatever it is that our main goal is, focusing there and not the people, but also sticking to like collaborative structures. If we need to be working together, focus on active listening and being professional in all responses, things of that sort. But above all else, making sure that you are focused on whatever it is that the common goal for the workplace is and not just the people in that setting. It just makes it easier to get through those challenges and those roadblocks. And sometimes when you can work with people who you may not have aligned visions with and you may not really connect with, and you get to that end point and you reach that goal, it opens a new door for connection because you've been through the mud, you've been through the struggle together, and on the other side, you never know what that can open in terms of building a relationship with somebody. And it doesn't always have to. Sometimes it's okay. It's okay to say, "Hey, we're work people. We are colleagues, and that's where our relationship will stay." But sometimes those really rough roads lead to some really cool paved paths.
Nice. It reminded me going back to our how we started our conversation about family. Yes, we were talking about having family, but in our families in general, we love our family members. We don't necessarily like them.
Oh yeah.
But we need
Right.
to do experiences and behaviors that get the family work and done, the household work done, if you will, the metaphorical. And that's how you're approaching it. We may not get along, we may not click, but we still have to love that we're in this workspace and that is our passion. And we're connected to each other by a mission. So let's put our heads down and use collaborative structures, as you said, to get work done together.
Mhm.
So now, you and I are working, and I think we have a connection. So, is it important for us to overtly, either one of us or the group, to state what are the goals that we intend to get out of this extended connection that we have at work?
I believe very strongly in clear is kind and being more overtly explicit with what you believe the goals of a relationship are tend to help foster the development and the growth of the relationship. But then it also prevents it from becoming anything that could feel more one sided. Um, because if I come out and I say, hey, I really enjoy working with you on this project. I'd love to do another one, but you're not feeling the same way. That's where communication needs to happen. So I'm a big fan of the quote, clear is kind, because if you're not clear, you're not being kind.
Got it. And sometimes kind is being straightforward, that
Mhm.
not necessarily is good news. But you
Yeah.
want to know that up front. You're being kind in being straightforward, that this isn't working out. And that is showing up as kindness.
Mhm.
We have this conversation, something of talking about toxic positivity, when everybody's just being positive, be positive, but that doesn't help advance the work as a professional. So I really like that you're leaving with that's one of the things that we need to do to nurture and grow connections at work, is being clear. Any other advice about nurturing and feeding a connection at work, in addition to being transparent, vulnerable, very direct, as you said, being kind with the goals and the expectations so it's not one sided? Any other feedback that you have for us, or advice on building these connections and nurturing and taking care of them so that they are sustainable?
Um, I think it's really important to show up as your authentic self from day one, as best as you can. I know that that's not always the most comfortable thing, and you might have to lean into that over time. But if you can show up as your authentic self from the very start, you're giving yourself a chance to create meaningful connections based on everything that you are and that you encompass and that you value and your morals, just by being very true to who you are and allowing others to get a glimpse of who that person is. I know for me, as a teenager and as I first stepped into the profession, I was a little more closed off. I was really afraid of being wrong, so I just didn't want to say anything. And I learned through experience and over time that the more authentic I was to who I truly am, the stronger connections I developed. And those are the friendships and the professional relationships that have really stuck with me over the years.
I like that, just being your authentic self. We have another Avidly podcast called, that deals with imposter syndrome, where you don't feel like you belong. What you've just talked about is, don't be an imposter while you're at work. Be who you are. You earned it, and show your skill set, show your talent, and contribute to the self and team projects. And that's a way that you build connections, build community, and you might even attract individuals that are going to
Mhm.
ask you, what's your favorite TV show or what excites you about work today?
Mhm.
As you look at, and you mentioned earlier about in your childhood, but in your early career, can you remember a connection that you made that really helped your career and informed your success moving forward?
I think that my first step into my career was a little bit more complicated in the setting that I stepped back into. So when I began teaching, I returned to the same high school that I had just graduated from. And so developing relationships with my colleagues felt even harder than it would if I had gone to somewhere where nobody knew me, because I was doing two things at once. I was establishing myself as an educator while also trying to break the mold of this person that they had already developed in their heads, that was this 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old student who sat in their classrooms, took instruction, and just did the work. And so it really took a lot of practice in just trying to lean into those conversations and setting super clear boundaries with my colleagues. Like, this is me as a professional. I know you knew me as a teenager. That's awesome. I'm sorry for you sometimes because I probably talked a lot during class. But me as a professional, I'm here to learn. I'm here to work with you. I want to share my ideas. And so I really actually leaned into my specific department that I taught in. Along with AVID, I was also an English teacher. And there are some of the teachers in that setting that were really stepped into being my mentoring roles. But what really worked for me was finding somebody in a school across town doing the same job as me, but that wasn't in my building. And that person has really influenced a lot of how I taught, how I took on leadership roles in the workplace, and she continues to be a huge support system for me. Anytime something good happens for me, I reach out to her and I'm like, hey, guess what? This is like the new thing that happened in my personal life or my professional or in school. And I know that she's somebody that I can always lean on, even though we weren't necessarily in the same building. We were facing some of the same challenges, and she was more experienced than I was, so, I definitely knew she knew a whole lot more than I did and still does.
Yeah. So the connections pact, making sustainable relationships and community. You've talked about seek a mentor and also
Mhm,
network. And they necessarily both have to be at work and
mhm,
outside of work, because then you
mhm,
get to have that opportunity to talk about outside of work with individuals to give you some feedback, maybe unbiased,
mhm,
and not let subjectivity influence how you're negotiating your community building, your connections building. So I'd like that you give us those two tips. In making sustainable connections is find a mentor,
mhm.
especially when you're new in your career, and also keep on networking with individuals in your career, but not necessarily in that same office that you're at.
I think it's so important to expand beyond your workplace so that you can have another network that they don't necessarily know every person that you bring up, but they can be your cheerleader. They can empathize with you and your experience, and it's not necessarily a shared experience, but you're able to kind of just share what you need and you have a support system that you kind of balances it all out.
Yeah, you're bringing it back to investing in yourself by
Mhm,
having a network, because it'll create impact in how you show up and what you do at work, and it'll help you celebrate. And sometimes, as we said, was clear as kind. Sometimes you celebrate your failures. As long as you're learning from it, you can turn it into a
mhm.
success. That leads me to the next question. What's the biggest mistake to avoid when trying to make connections at work?
Oversharing. Coming in and just saying, having this mindset that everybody is on your team and you just kind of tell everybody every secret and every deep detail about your entire life story. not everyone is always on your team, and that's super unfortunate. So you have to be very mindful of oversharing and when it's appropriate to share and with who. Again, going back to a boundary, making sure you're not crossing someone else's boundary with the information that you're divulging in the conversations. But that's a hard lesson I think we all learn is when we overshare and you're like, oops, maybe I shouldn't have said all of those things.
Yeah. You said it a while ago, read the room. And so you
Mhm,
might lead with inquiry and not lead with telling all about yourself or telling everything that you know about this project. I like
mhm,
the three before me. You listen to three
mhm,
people before you speak. Is also valuing, and you said making a right balance of in your connections or your community that there's a right balance of give and take. Who's getting who as far as our goal from here?
mhm.
Now, what's the one thing you wish you knew about at work in your first year, especially when you're talking about making connections?
Oh, um, more people want you to succeed than what is blatantly apparent. Um, I felt very much like I felt very isolated. I went into my building knowing I was like the youngest person that worked there. And I think I was just more afraid of failing in front of people. And what I learned over time is they were actually a majority of them were on my team, even if they didn't outwardly say it. These people that did see me as a teenager and then watched me step into a profession, they wanted me to succeed because they had already invested time in me. And now they were getting to see the results of that investment in just a very different way. Um, so you have more people on your team than what you would imagine. They just don't always say it out loud. And sometimes it's the very subtle things that make you realize that somebody's out there cheering for you and they're hoping that you do succeed.
That's asset thinking rather than deficit thinking, as you said. And we just get into that deficit thinking the entire time, but that's really good advice. That there are more people out there that are rooting for you than you can imagine. So do your
Mhm,
best, and those same people are going to come and surprise you and help you when you fall down and fail, so you can get up, learn, and quickly continue to walk and then run. Now,
mhm,
if you have not shared it yet, because you've mentioned and given us a lot of pieces of advice, so you can repeat it or say something new. What's the one piece of advice to someone in their first year, possibly second year in their professional career that you want to give to making sure they're scaffolding to building real, lasting connections? What advice would that be? If you haven't said it, say it or repeat something that you've. What advice would that be? If you haven't said
Ooh,
it, say it or repeat something.
I guess maybe getting comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable at the very beginning. It's going to be odd when you're in the learning phase of your new career or your new workplace and everything's new and it's going to feel uncomfortable. But just keeping in mind that at some point, every other person in that building was the new person and they were also uncomfortable. So it's not an isolated feeling, but get comfortable with not always being comfortable.
You're making me feel uncomfortable right now. Because I think we should switch, and you should be the host, and that's good. I'm going to take your advice. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's only going to make me better. That
Mhm,
I want to be like Chantel is going to make me better in my own version of myself. And so,
mhm,
with that, I do want to thank you, Chantel, for giving us such a powerful takeaway. Especially get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Everybody was new at that point, so you're not new to being new, but you
mhm,
are new in that you bring something special and that you could be a trailblazer, maybe not the first day, but as you in your trajectory in your career. Um, Start small, you've told us. Stay curious. Don't share all your secrets. Why don't you listen to some and show up for people? Because
mhm,
they're going to show up for you, like they surprised you when you're getting your master's as you build that pact. as we unpacked your career and your history, took some ways about learning about how to make meaningful connections at work. I really wanted to thank you for that. As we end for today, some of you know Brene Brown, and I'd like to end with a quote from her. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. When they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from relationship. That's what you talked about, Chantel. Sustenance and strength from relationships. So until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep building those meaningful connections one day at a time. That's our time for today in this episode of Avidly Adulting. Be good today, because that's enough. And together, let's strive to be great tomorrow.